I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered.
The room had been prepared for a routine royal briefing. Instead, King Charles entered, carrying a sealed document that would alter the balance of power inside the monarchy. Without ceremony, without warning, and with his family watching in stunned silence, the king announced that Catherine would assume the unprecedented position of Queen Regent of Britain. Camilla did not move. William stopped breathing for a moment, and Catherine herself seemed unable to comprehend the authority Charles had just placed in her hands. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had summoned William, Catherine, Camilla, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward to Buckingham Palace. He wanted no advisors and no chance of the decision leaking before he spoke. The red dispatch box beside him, a secure case for royal papers, proved this was not a family discussion. It was an act of authority. The king arrived late, exhausted. He broke the seal on an emergency declaration, a formal written order transferring defined duties during a sudden royal withdrawal, and began reading. Catherine, Princess of Wales, would become Queen Regent of Britain, carrying out sovereign responsibilities in his name. Catherine looked at William as though she had misheard. The prince remained motionless, proud of her yet frightened by what the decision suggested about his father. She turned back toward Charles, but the monarch continued without softening a word. Her authority would include ceremonial approvals, state briefings, and leadership of royal councils. Camilla removed her hand from the table. She understood that the regency had not been given to her. The queen consort refused to look at Catherine, while Anne watched Charles with suspicion, and Edward stared at the declaration. Charles then delivered the shock. He had prepared the order days earlier with a constitutional council, senior advisors testing whether the arrangement could function within royal practice. Camilla had not been told. William had not been consulted. Catherine had not been warned. Anne leaned closer and noticed a sentence beneath the signature. Charles had entrusted Catherine to preserve continuity, unity, and public confidence. Those words transformed the role. She was not merely filling an empty chair. She had been chosen to hold the monarchy together. The king removed his glasses and placed his pen beside Catherine's name. The faint metal sound cut through the silence. Camilla pushed her chair backwards and faced him. "How long have you been planning to replace me?" Charles gave no answer. But the declaration had exposed far more than a transfer of duties. It had uncovered the fears of everyone in that room, and those fears were about to collide. Behind the grandeur of the emergency declaration stood four people facing four very different versions of the same crisis. Charles saw a monarchy he could no longer protect alone. Catherine saw a duty that might consume her family. William saw his future arriving before he was ready. And Camilla saw the security she had fought decades to achieve, slipping away in a single sentence. The new regency was constitutional in language, but painfully personal in consequence. William had spent years preparing to become king, yet Charles now believed his son had to remain untouched by the immediate struggle. Succession, the ordered transfer of the crown from one monarch to the next, depended on the prince protecting his children, his public standing, and the future beyond this crisis. The king was not pushing him aside. He was shielding him from a battle that could weaken everything still to come. Catherine carried a different burden. She had earned trust through restraint, calm judgment, and an instinct for lowering tension without demanding credit. That was why Charles had chosen her. It was also why the choice felt so cruel. The qualities that made her suitable for power were the same qualities that had kept her from ever seeking it. William followed his wife into a private corridor and closed the door behind them. He asked whether she could accept the role without sacrificing herself. Catherine looked away before answering. The title did not frighten her, she admitted. Failing George, Charlotte and Louis did. The prince took both her hands and asked her to face him. He said the authority did not trouble him. The loneliness it might bring her did. Camilla returned to her rooms, carrying a humiliation she could not name aloud. She removed the diamond brooch from her dress and placed it on the table with trembling fingers. The queen consort had spent decades reaching the position beside Charles, yet one signed declaration had told her that rank and trust were not the same thing. She was queen in public, but privately she had been judged unfit to lead. Anne spoke quietly with Edward after the meeting. In a documented palace memorandum later kept with the Regency papers, the Princess Royal explained that Charles had considered several arrangements before choosing Catherine. Camilla's name had appeared in an early draft. The king had crossed it out himself. William then learned that Catherine had already received confidential state briefings for weeks. She explained that she thought the papers were preparing her to support him, not to act in her own name. That discovery unsettled the prince. His father had been planning this longer than anyone understood. After midnight, Catherine entered Princess Charlotte's bedroom. The child sensed her fear and asked whether something bad had happened. Her mother sat beside her and answered, "Something important has happened, and I must be brave." William later found a sealed note from Charles waiting outside his room. The king asked him to come alone the next morning. One sentence had been underlined twice. The declaration had been forced by an incident that could not be ignored. To understand why Charles placed that burden on Catherine, William would first have to confront the hidden moment that made the decision unavoidable. The emergency declaration had not begun with a lawyer, a council, or a constitutional plan. It began 3 weeks earlier at Windsor Castle, during a private reception that should have passed unnoticed. One conversation became an argument. One argument exposed a dangerous struggle for control. And when Charles watched a trusted royal instruction deliberately overturned in front of foreign guests, the king understood that hesitation had become a threat. That night became the point of no return. Charles had already begun reducing his public workload while trying to preserve the appearance of complete stability. That balance mattered, because every royal office depended on knowing whose decision was final. The sovereign's office, the team that carries out the monarch's direct instructions, still answered to him, but other households had started acting as though his authority could be interpreted. Camilla's staff had taken an increasingly active role in coordinating engagements and ceremonial choices. Those decisions once required clear approval from the king's team, yet boundaries had started to blur. William saw the confusion growing. Catherine felt it too. Senior courtiers began choosing between competing instructions, and each choice deepened the resentment no one wanted to name. The breaking point came at a Windsor diplomatic reception. Camilla ordered Catherine's scheduled address removed from the program and told officials she would deliver the principal welcome herself. The program was the official running order for the event, showing who would speak and when. Charles had personally assigned that speech to the princess. Catherine learned of the change only minutes before the reception began. She did not argue. She did not protest. She folded the prepared speech carefully and slipped it into her handbag. Charles noticed the movement. He also saw the pain she was trying to hide. William pulled his father into a side chamber before the guests departed. The prince accused him of allowing palace rivalry to humiliate his wife. Charles answered sharply, insisting that the evening could not become a family confrontation. Then William asked the question that ended the argument. Did anyone inside the palace still know whose instructions mattered? Anne arrived later with the original program in her hand. The Princess Royal showed Charles his own approval beside Catherine's name. A second instruction had been added in different ink, authorizing the Queen Consort to replace her. The alteration turned suspicion into proof. Charles confronted Camilla privately after the reception. She defended the decision in a recorded conversation preserved within the fictional royal file, saying she had acted to prevent the monarchy from appearing weak. But the king heard something colder beneath her explanation. She believed authority belonged to whoever was willing to take it. Silence followed. Then Charles unfolded Catherine's unused speech, read the first line, and lowered himself into a chair. He circled her name and wrote 2 words beneath it: "She leads." That same night, he contacted a retired constitutional advisor and requested an emergency framework, a formal plan placing royal duties beyond internal competition. 3 weeks later, Camilla finally learned what Charles had built from that moment, and she was ready to demand an answer face to face. The palace had survived scandals, betrayals, and bitter private divisions, but rarely had husband and wife faced each other with the crown itself standing between them. Camilla entered Charles's study carrying the emergency declaration and closed the door behind her. There were no aides, no private secretaries, and no carefully rehearsed smiles. She wanted to know why Catherine had been trusted with authority that she believed belonged beside the throne. Charles was prepared to tell her, and the answer would wound them both. Camilla had requested an immediate private audience after reading the powers granted to Catherine. The new regent would oversee royal audiences, approve ceremonial programs, and authorize important communications issued in the sovereign's name. A royal audience was a formal meeting conducted on behalf of the monarch, and control over those meetings meant control over who could reach the center of power. Charles initially refused to see her, but she entered before his staff could stop her. The queen consort placed the signed declaration directly in front of him. She accused the king of using Catherine's popularity to erase decades of loyalty. She reminded him of the hatred they had endured, the years when every public appearance became a test, and the private promises that had carried them through it. Now, she said, he had rewarded that devotion by excluding her when authority mattered most. Charles did not deny her sacrifice. He admitted that Camilla had stood beside him when many others would not. But the monarch told her that companionship and constitutional judgment were not the same thing. Loving someone did not automatically make that person the safest guardian of the crown's future. Camilla stepped closer and asked the question without hesitation. Did he believe Catherine was more worthy? The king answered carefully. Worthiness was not the issue. Public trust was. Restraint was. The ability to accept limits without turning every boundary into a personal insult was. Catherine possessed those qualities, he said, because she had never confused influence with ownership. Camilla pushed the declaration across the desk. The movement sent Charles's pen rolling onto the carpet, but he did not bend to retrieve it. She demanded proof that one disputed reception had justified such a devastating decision. Charles opened a documented file prepared by his private office. It recorded several occasions when her household had altered arrangements carrying his direct approval. The Windsor speech had not been an isolated mistake. It had been the final warning. The king then delivered the revelation that cut deepest. Catherine had never asked for the regency. During 2 recorded consultations with the advisors, she had urged them to consider William or Anne instead. The princess had resisted the power Camilla believed had been stolen from her. Camilla's anger faltered, but only for a moment. She warned that the royal household would not follow Catherine unanimously. Charles looked at her and said he already knew exactly who intended to resist. The regency is not a punishment, he added. Camilla asked whether he still trusted her judgment. His silence answered. The argument ended with a door closing. But beyond that door, another battle had already begun, over who possessed the power to make Charles' declaration real. A royal title means nothing, unless the people controlling the machinery of monarchy agree to obey it. Behind Catherine's elevation stood a tightly guarded alliance of advisors, family members, and constitutional officials who had spent days preparing for resistance. Yet the most important force was not a document or ancient precedent. It was Charles himself, confronting the possibility that his final act of control might permanently damage his marriage. To secure Catherine's authority, the king would have to choose decisiveness over comfort. Charles met with Anne, Edward, William, and 3 senior advisors before dawn. Their task was simple in language, but dangerous in practice. Define exactly what Catherine could do and what would remain reserved for the sovereign. The operational order, a written instruction explaining how the regency would function day by day, had to be clear enough that no royal household could pretend to misunderstand it. The framework gave Catherine authority to lead major royal councils, approve ceremonial programs, receive selected state papers, and settle disputes between competing offices. State papers were confidential government documents, sent to the monarch for review, and access to them placed the new regent inside the highest level of royal responsibility. That mattered, because the crisis was no longer about symbolism. It was about who could act when Charles stepped back. Anne watched her brother hold the pen without signing. The Princess Royal understood his hesitation. Once the order carried his name, resistance to Catherine would become resistance to the king himself. She told him that delay would leave the princess exposed to attack while denying her the power to defend her position. William then objected to one sentence allowing his wife to act independently when urgent decisions could not wait. The prince feared the wording would make it appear that he had been bypassed in his own succession. Charles listened, but the concern cut deeper than pride. The future king knew that one badly framed headline could turn support for Catherine into doubt about him. Catherine entered before the discussion ended. She had learned about the disagreement through a documented message from William's private secretary, and she immediately offered to refuse the title. The princess said she would not accept authority that divided husband from father. Charles answered with brutal calm. William had never been rejected. He had been deliberately protected. The king explained that temporary controversy must never stain his son's eventual accession, the formal moment when an heir becomes sovereign. Catherine had been chosen because she could absorb the immediate pressure without weakening the crown's future. Anne then placed a confidential list on the table. Several household officials had questioned Catherine's authority before the declaration was public. The Princess Royal explained that the names came from a recorded security review, proving details were already moving between rival palace offices. One name changed the room. A senior member of Camilla's staff had arranged a competing briefing at the exact hour of Catherine's first council. Charles finally lifted the operational order. He hesitated, looked toward Catherine, and found no smile waiting for him. She gave only a steady nod. The king signed. Then he placed the pen in her hand. By sunrise, Catherine possessed the authority of the regency, but the first open act of resistance was already waiting inside the palace. The fallout began before Britain had even heard the announcement. Staff members canceled meetings, private offices challenged instructions, and long-standing loyalties hardened into opposing camps. Catherine arrived for her first council, carrying Charles's signed order, only to discover that half the expected officials had been directed elsewhere. The insult was deliberate. The message was unmistakable. Someone intended to prove that the new regent possessed a title without obedience, and Catherine now had to decide whether leadership required patience or force. Catherine's first duty was to chair an emergency coordination meeting on the king's reduced schedule and the redistribution of royal engagements. A royal council was a formal gathering where senior officials coordinated duties carried out in the monarch's name. That made the meeting more than a diary discussion. It was the first test of whether Charles's declaration could function beyond paper. Minutes before the council began, several officials received new instructions ordering them to attend a competing briefing arranged through Camilla's household. William learned of the move through a documented message from a private secretary and entered the chamber moments behind his wife. The prince saw the empty chairs immediately. He also saw her fingers tightening around the declaration folder. Catherine said nothing at first. She walked around the table, removed each missing official's name card and stacked them beside her papers. Then the regent sat down and began without waiting. Her voice remained calm, but every word carried steel. Royal duty, she told those present, could not depend on personal disappointment. Camilla remained inside her private rooms while the division deepened. The queen consort insisted to an aide that she had not personally ordered the absences. Yet when the staff member asked whether the rival briefing should be cancelled, she refused to intervene. Her silence protected the rebellion, even if her signature did not appear beneath it. Anne moved before anyone else could hesitate. The Princess Royal entered the competing meeting carrying a copy of Charles's order, and informed the officials that ignoring Catherine's summons amounted to direct defiance of the king. She ordered them back to the council chamber, and warned that loyalty to one household could never outrank obedience to the crown. Edward uncovered something even more dangerous. The prince found copied declarations marked with handwritten objections, questioning whether Catherine could use the word queen before William became sovereign. The challenge was no longer administrative. Someone was trying to make the title itself appear illegitimate. The final absent official arrived late and avoided Catherine's eyes. She did not scold him. Instead, the regent slid Charles's signed order across the table and asked him to read the final sentence aloud. His voice weakened at the words, "complete and immediate cooperation." William watched his wife close the folder. Catherine then requested a private meeting with Camilla and said the division would end that night, one way or another. She had proved she could command a room. Restoring the family would require something far more dangerous, facing the queen consort without Charles standing between them. There were no advisors in the room, no constitutional papers, and no husbands to translate anger into diplomacy. Catherine and Camilla faced one another as two women whose lives had been consumed by the same institution in profoundly different ways. One had spent years fighting to be accepted. The other had risen by appearing never to fight at all. Their private meeting would become the true turning point, not because either woman surrendered, but because both finally spoke without the protection of titles. Catherine had requested a small sitting room rather than an official office. She wanted no long table, no secretaries, and no symbols of rank standing between them. That choice mattered, because royal hierarchy, the formal order deciding who stands above whom, had become the very source of their conflict. For once, neither woman would hide behind it. Camilla arrived expecting a demand for loyalty or an apology. The queen consort sat down carefully, kept her handbag beside her, and waited for Catherine to speak. Instead of issuing an order, the regent asked a question. Had she truly believed Charles would choose her? Camilla answered without hesitation. Yes, she admitted in their private recorded conversation that she had endured years of condemnation, believing acceptance would eventually become trust. The queen had stood beside the king through scandal, anger, and rejection. She had assumed that protecting him would one day mean being trusted to protect everything around him. Catherine listened before giving her own confession. She had never wanted authority over Camilla. The princess spoke about returning home to George, Charlotte, and Louis, while carrying decisions that could shape their futures. She feared becoming so consumed by duty that her children would remember the title more clearly than the mother who held it. Camilla studied her and asked whether Catherine considered her an enemy. The regent answered with quiet force. The monarchy could not survive if every woman near the crown had to defeat another woman to prove her value. Catherine said their pain had been turned into competition for too long, and the palace had nearly broken because both were expected to see the other as a threat. Catherine then disclosed a decision documented in her first written recommendation to Charles. She had asked the king to preserve Camilla's charitable leadership and public position, provided her household formally accepted the regent's authority. The princess had no intention of humiliating her. She wanted the resistance to end. Camilla's expression changed. She then identified the source of the leaked objections. A senior advisor had encouraged her to challenge the declaration, promising Charles would retreat once the palace appeared divided. The queen consort agreed to dismiss him personally and attend Catherine's public installation, a formal ceremony confirming her new authority. Then Camilla reached into her handbag and removed the emergency declaration. Catherine expected anger. Instead, the queen consort smoothed the creased page, placed it between them and said, "I will not stand in your way." The peace was fragile, but it was real. Now Catherine had to face Britain and discover whether the country saw a guardian of the crown or a woman reaching too close to it. By morning, the secret that had divided the palace belonged to the world. Britain awoke to a title no living generation had expected to hear: Queen Regent. Television studios abandoned their schedules. Crowds gathered outside royal gates. Newspapers printed Catherine's face beneath language usually reserved for accession and abdication. Yet the defining public moment was not the announcement itself. It was the sight of Catherine entering the palace beside Camilla, while Charles watched from within, and William followed one step behind. Buckingham Palace released the declaration at precisely 8 o'clock. The statement confirmed that Catherine would hold temporary authority while Charles reduced his duties, and it stressed that William remained the undisputed heir. An heir is the person next in line to inherit the throne, so that sentence mattered. The title changed who could act now without changing who would reign next. Broadcasters immediately asked whether the announcement revealed a hidden constitutional crisis. The palace answered by publishing Charles's signed message, in which the king described the regent as his chosen guardian of continuity. Continuity meant keeping royal duties stable during a period of uncertainty, and those words turned speculation into a personal endorsement from the sovereign himself. The London Chronicle captured the public mood in a single front page. Catherine appeared beneath the headline, "The King's Choice," while the subheading declared, "Charles entrusts Britain's crown duties to the princess who never asked for power." The paper did not present her as a victor. It presented her as someone accepting a burden. Hundreds gathered outside Buckingham Palace before her motorcade arrived. A woman near the gates lifted her young daughter onto her shoulders, and the child waved a small Union flag above the crowd. When Catherine stepped out, people began chanting her first name instead of her title. The regent briefly lost her formal composure and smiled directly toward the girl. William watched from the palace entrance, visibly moved. The prince understood that Britain was no longer seeing his wife only as his future queen. The country was beginning to see her as a leader in her own right, and that success carried a quiet danger. Public devotion could strengthen their partnership, or place an unexpected shadow across his future. Camilla remained inside her car for several seconds. The queen consort knew that one image of her entering alone could revive every story of division. Catherine turned back and waited. She refused to let the public moment become an act of humiliation, and the two women walked inside together. Charles then appeared during the formal address. The king confirmed that the decision had been his alone, ending claims that William or palace officials had forced him aside. He spoke briefly, but his presence carried the full weight of the crown. Catherine approached the lectern carrying no crown and no ceremonial jewels. She held only the signed declaration that had nearly broken the family. Britain had given its answer. Now she had to explain whether the title represented ambition, sacrifice, or something greater than both. Catherine stood before Britain with power she had never requested, a title no one had predicted, and a family nearly fractured by the decision that placed her there. Yet the final meaning of the declaration was not found in constitutional language or palace rivalry. It was revealed in the choices made after the shock: Charles accepting his limits, William supporting a wife whose duty now equaled his own, Camilla releasing her struggle for control, and Catherine choosing service over triumph. Catherine began her first address by affirming Charles as sovereign and William as the future king. She made one truth unmistakable: the regency protected the line of succession rather than changing it. The line of succession was the established order deciding who would inherit the throne, and her new authority did not move the prince from his rightful place. The regent then defined her position as temporary stewardship during a period of royal vulnerability. Stewardship meant guarding an institution without claiming permanent ownership of it. Catherine promised discipline, continuity, and unity. She would not create a separate court, gather personal loyalists, or turn the king's weakness into her own advantage. Charles listened from a private room with Anne beside him. The Princess Royal watched her brother struggle to contain his emotion as Catherine thanked him for trusting her. The king lowered his head. He understood that his decision had protected the monarchy, but it had also forced the woman he trusted to carry a burden he could no longer hold alone. William joined his wife after the address. The prince took her hand before the assembled royal household, making his support impossible to misunderstand. Her authority did not weaken their marriage or diminish his future. It strengthened both, because he had chosen partnership over pride. Camilla also fulfilled her promise. The queen consort stood during the formal acknowledgement of the regent, then dismissed the advisor who had encouraged resistance. In a documented statement delivered to Charles's office, she accepted responsibility for allowing personal hurt to deepen the palace division. Catherine's first signed instruction brought the crisis to its end. She preserved Camilla's charitable work, restored one clear chain of command, and ordered every royal office to serve the crown rather than individual factions. Her first use of power was not revenge. It was reconciliation. After the ceremony, Catherine returned the signing pen to Charles. The king closed her fingers around it and told her to keep it. William smiled across the room. Camilla offered a restrained nod. Anne quietly closed the council folder. The crisis was over. Charles's declaration succeeded because it did not crown Catherine above the family. It placed her at the center of its survival. The title, Queen Regent of Britain, became a symbol of earned trust, marital loyalty, and a monarchy capable of changing without destroying itself. The emergency declaration began as an admission of royal weakness, but it ended as something stronger, proof that the crown could survive not through one person's power, but through the courage to place trust where it had truly been earned. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.